Arsenal set for summer transfer, despite Thomas Partey contract decision in Mikel Arteta. Boost Arsenal are set to move ahead with plans for midfield summer signing, despite contract renewal talks for Thomas Partey. Despite there being an Arsenal match to discuss on Wednesday evening, the relatively dull atmosphere surrounding the build-up to another domestic draw for the Gunners was shattered as news began to circulate on what appears to be a complete change regarding Thomas Partey's future. Initially broken by the BBC and The Athletic, Arsenal are now reportedly more open to the player staying. The club are actively now in talks over the player's future. As recently as a week ago, this did not seem to be the case, with the Ghanaian heading toward the exit. However, Andrea Berta's appointment and influence are perhaps the key to this change. Berta worked with Partey at Atletico Madrid and has come to Arsenal to see Partey help in progressing the club to the semi-finals of the Champions League. Whether Partey stays or goes remains unclear for now, and it could be that the player and club fail to agree on new terms, and he does indeed leave in the summer. However, this change of stance could create a different dynamic for the number 6 position next season. Arsenal are working with the assumption that the work done to sign Martin Zubimendi will be successful. Football.London understands. Work across 3 sporting directors, Edu Gaspar, Jason Ido, and now Berta will help see the Spaniard arrive this summer transfer window. However, it would have been assumed that the Real Sociedad talisman would come in and immediately take over the defensive midfield position in the starting 8. If Partey stays, that might be much less assured. This campaign has been arguably Partey's best in North London. It certainly has when it comes to availability. Injuries have been a constant throughout his time with the team, and one of the reasons many feel that a new deal is a risk for the club to take. However, should Zubimendi be joining, that risk does come under some control. Having both Partey and Zubimendi, along with Declan Rice, gives Mikel Arteta plenty of coverage at the number 6 position, and of a serious caliber too. The left 8 would still need further depth of quality, but perhaps keeping Partey allows for the club to either bring a different player in or open the pathway to an internal solution, such as youngster Max Dowman, who is incredibly highly thought of, and there is always Miles Lewis-Skelly, who could be an option. Arteta wants his side to be as competitive as possible for next season, and it appears should Partey be renewed, he sees that with the Ghanaian in mind. Did Mikel Arteta suffer 3rd unique VAR mistake? Arsenal vs Crystal Palace referee review football. London reviews the big decision by the officials after Arsenal's 2-2 draw with Crystal Palace, which regarded a ruled-out goal scored by Gabriel Martinelli. Arsenal were disappointing again in their 2-2 draw with Crystal Palace, which saw the Gunners record their 13th draw of the campaign. Only Everton, 14, have more than Mikel Arteta's side. Asked after the match for his response to the questions, and it was evident the frustration in losing so many points from leading positions. Well, we haven't been able to see the games off for many reasons, and the margins have been too small, he said. Sometimes that's when I credit the opposition. It's true that we played 5 times with 10 men. There are a lot of factors, but obviously it's something that we've done much better in the past, especially when we've been ahead in games. And today, without really much happening, especially in the second half, we have to be able to see the game off. Many times a single goal lead has not been enough for Arsenal to claim the 3 points, and they have failed to open up the 2-goal buffer. Yet they were denied the chance to see a 2-goal gap emerge after Gabriel Martinelli's goal was ruled out. At the time, it was not clear whether an offside call had been made or something else. The screens inside the grounds mentioned checking for an offside. In the end, it was deemed that the ball had indeed gone out of play before Jurrien Timber managed to find a cross. Replays were very tight, and the camera sadly did not have the benefit of being on the side of the goal, not obscured by the netting. However, replays showed the tiniest of margins where you could see the ball had gone out. FL Review. The issue with the decision was the time it took. 8 minutes were added on to the end of the second half, mainly as a result of the VAR check to determine whether the ball had gone out of play. This is far from the first time this has happened to Arsenal. It has left them asking again questions why the technology is not in place for swifter resolutions at the very minimum. But looking at those 2 previous examples, as the incident did indeed invoke those memories. First came the controversy, which sparked an enraged response from Mikel Arteta in his post-match press conference. Joelinton's foul in the box was one part, but the cross which led to that came after Joe Willock appeared to keep the ball in play, despite cameras showing the ball over the line. VAR could not conclusively rule on the call, and so went with the on-field decision. Then, against West Ham at the Emirates Stadium, Jared Bowen was again deemed to have kept the ball in play, as Thomas Soucek scored the first of what would be a damaging home defeat to the Hammers in a season that saw Arteta's side lose out on the title by just 2 points. Again, VAR could not determine whether or not the ball had left the field of play and went with the on-field decision. In the case of Martinelli's goal, it was the only time the flag was indeed raised by the assistant referee. Arsenal set for summer transfer, despite Thomas Partey contract decision in Mikel Arteta. Boost Arsenal are set to move ahead with plans for midfield summer signing, despite contract renewal talks for Thomas Partey. Despite there being an Arsenal match to discuss on Wednesday evening, the relatively dull atmosphere surrounding the build-up to another domestic draw for the Gunners was shattered as news began to circulate on what appears to be a complete change regarding Thomas Partey's future. Initially broken by the BBC and The Athletic, Arsenal are now reportedly more open to the player staying. The club are actively now in talks over the player's future. As recently as a week ago, this did not seem to be the case, with the Ghanaian heading toward the exit. However, Andrea Berta's appointment and influence are perhaps the key to this change. Berta worked with Partey at Atletico Madrid and has come to Arsenal to see Partey help in progressing the club to the semi-finals of the Champions League. Whether Partey stays or goes remains unclear for now, and it could be that the player and club fail to agree on new terms, and he does indeed leave in the summer. However, this change of stance could create a different dynamic for the number 6 position next season. Arsenal are working with the assumption that the work done to sign Martin Zubimendi will be successful. Football.London understands. Work across 3 sporting directors, Edu Gaspar, Jason Ido, and now Berta will help see the Spaniard arrive this summer transfer window. However, it would have been assumed that the Real Sociedad talisman would come in and immediately take over the defensive midfield position in the starting 8. If Partey stays, that might be much less assured. This campaign has been arguably Partey's best in North London. It certainly has when it comes to availability. Injuries have been a constant throughout his time with the team, and one of the reasons many feel that a new deal is a risk for the club to take. However, should Zubimendi be joining, that risk does come under some control. Having both Partey and Zubimendi, along with Declan Rice, gives Mikel Arteta plenty of coverage at the number 6 position, and of a serious caliber too. The left 8 would still need further depth of quality, but perhaps keeping Partey allows for the club to either bring a different player in or open the pathway to an internal solution, such as youngster Max Dowman, who is incredibly highly thought of, and there is always Miles Lewis-Skelly, who could be an option. Arteta wants his side to be as competitive as possible for next season, and it appears should Partey be renewed, Bukayo Saka Arsenal injury warning hands Mikel Arteta, unavoidable PSG Champions League nightmare. Arsenal news as Mikel Arteta risks injuries with team selection, but has no other option after Bukayo Saka warning. Mikel Arteta eventually rotated his Arsenal team so much that even Raheem Sterling got a game. Nathan Butler-Oyedeji also came on. Both Thomas Partey and Jurrien Timber were left unused. With a delicate balancing act to play in the next 10 days, Arteta chose to stick with the core of his best reçu, including David Raya, William Saliba, Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, and Gabriel Martinelli, as well as Mikel Merino back in midfield. After half an hour of an eventual 4-0 win over Ipswich Town, it had nearly backfired. It is strange to suggest that an 11 which scored twice inside 28 minutes could be wrong in any way. However, that is the way in which Arsenal's next 2 weeks might play out. Already 2-0, up and cruising against a team on the brink of returning straight back to the Championship, Leif Davis' tackle on Saka could have changed the course of the final month of Arsenal's season. The challenge, which earned Davis a red card, was everything Arteta hoped to avoid. In trying to keep his players sharp ahead of the upcoming Champions League semi-final first leg against Paris Saint-Germain, Arteta went strong and chose to make changes in the second half, rather than working the other way around. Saka and Merino lasted less than an hour, with Rice and Martinelli going off 15 minutes later. Odegaard got a full game, restricted by injuries across his squad, with 3 already ruled out for the remainder of the season, and Kai Havertz looking at an extremely hopeful, optimistic, and doubtful return for the Champions League final if Arsenal get there. Arteta does not have much room for experimenting. Instead, he is essentially forced to risk some players in games that carry little benefit. There are numerous strands to this. On the one hand, Arsenal have extra time to prepare for PSG after their next Premier League match, at home to Crystal Palace, was moved to Wednesday evening due to FA Cup semi-final scheduling. That allows for more rest and recovery. With this in mind, Arteta does not have to worry too much about fatigue with a week to prepare for the first leg in Europe. Given that all focus is on PSG, though, there are debates to be had over whether the main goers should be anywhere near the pitch in the meantime. Had Saka been truly hurt and then an injury concern for PSG, then hindsight would have said that playing him was foolish. Injuries can happen at any time, no matter how many precautions are taken, though. Is it worth living in fear for this week before PSG, or do the minutes in the legs of players help keep them sharp? Which one holds more weight? Saka has gotten up to speed incredibly well since coming back from his hamstring problem. These are all questions that Arteta will have to answer, and has already, it seems, found a stance. We have to somehow put 11 players out there and have 4 or 5 changes, so let's see how they recover in the next few days, he said of the juggling act between Palace, Ipswich, and PSG. The good thing is they are willing to play because they like the rhythm as well. We are so used to that rhythm every 3 days that the boys are demanding, and then we don't have a game at the weekend, so we have a gap there. So let's see how we get on Wednesday. Seeing Saka on the floor at Portman Road, and then replays of Davis's studs racking down onto his ankle, bending it the wrong way, will have been Arteta's worst nightmare. Any niggle, knock, or slight issue between now and PSG is of enhanced jeopardy. That cannot be avoided. Arsenal will need to put out teams with key players in when they face Palace this week, and also Bournemouth ahead of the second leg. Arteta can rotate but does not have much in terms of depth, especially at center back and in midfield. There are always going to be players exposed. When it comes to the untouchables, Saka, Saliba, Odegaard, and Rice, maybe the process will be different. Arsenal must find a way to protect them as much as possible. That is easier said than done, though. It is a tough situation to be in, but one that could make or break the semi-finals. Jamie Carragher now does a U-turn on £27 million Arsenal player versus Ipswich after saying his signing was a mistake. Arsenal used their momentum from beating Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu to punish Ipswich Town as they won 4-0 at Portman Road. There were plenty of positives and negatives to take for Arsenal, as they guaranteed that Liverpool would not win the Premier League title on Sunday if they beat Leicester City. Starting with the bad news, Bukayo Saka was walking gingerly after Arsenal defeated Ipswich off the back of Leif Davis' reckless challenge on him that earned the English defender a red card. But the positives were Leandro Trossard, who scored a brilliant brace, and Mikel Merino, who assisted Gabriel Martinelli's goal with a sumptuous back-heeled flick. Jamie Carragher dubbed Merino's signing a mistake earlier this year, but he had a change of heart after watching him impress once again in an Arsenal shirt against Ipswich. Jamie Carragher calls Mikel Merino a revelation after Ipswich Town versus Arsenal. Carragher was full of praise for Merino as Arsenal vanquished Ipswich on Sky Sports. Jamie Carragher pinpointed how Merino has 6 goals and 4 assists in his last 13 games for Arsenal, which shows how much he has progressed since his slow start, as was on display against Ipswich. The Liverpool legend said on Sky Sports, "I just look at Merino, he's been a revelation since he took on that striker role. I know he's deeper in midfield today, but in the last 13 games he has 6 goals and 4 assists. Mikel Merino stats for Arsenal versus Ipswich. The £27.4 million Sky Sports. Man will be proud of himself for continuing to work his socks off and make himself an important player in this Gunners side." Arsenal midfielder Merino has well and truly proven Jamie Carragher wrong, and his stats against Ipswich sum up why that is the case. Mikel Marino stats versus Ipswich Town: assists 1 big chances, created 1 touches, 32 duels, won 10 out of 17, dribbled past 0. In possession, the Spaniard was extremely efficient, managing to touch the ball just 32 times and still managed to register a wonderful assist. But it is off the ball where Marino truly stood out. The former Real Sociedad Dynamo won a staggering 10 out of the 17 duels he contested and was not even dribbled past once. Mikel Arteta predicted Marino to succeed, and his eye for talent deserves credit, as he has become a vital player for Arsenal during the second half of the season especially. Kieran McKenna shares what he thinks of Arsenal as a team after their 4-0 win versus Ipswich. Ipswich Town manager Kieran McKenna will have been aware of Arsenal's quality well before they even arrived at Portman Road. Arsenal had just dispatched Champions League holders Real Madrid over 2 legs prior to returning to Premier League action against Ipswich, a game they knew they needed to win. Mikel Arteta's side failed to beat Brentford in midst of their 2-legged tie against Madrid, and dropping any further Premier League points might have made things uncomfortable. Fortunately for Arsenal, and even though Arteta made a couple of changes, the Gunners were dominant in Suffolk, even before Leif Davis's red card. Mark Clattenburg thought Davis deserved to be sent off for his tackle on Bukayo Saka, a challenge that will have caused a bit of concern for Arsenal fans. Ipswich Town manager Kieran McKenna gives his Arsenal verdict. That being said, McKenna discussed Arsenal's performance when speaking to Sky Sports after full-time. The Ipswich manager described it as a tough afternoon for his side against an opponent that was too strong for the home side, even when it was 11 versus 11. Photo by David Price, Sure Arsenal FC via Getty Images. Praising Arsenal, McKenna said, "It was a tough afternoon. The first half an hour was really difficult. Arsenal played really well, and we were at full stretch to try and compete with them. After the red card and getting to halftime, I thought the group did really well in the second half. The game was almost done, and we had to show the right values, and we did that. They scored 2 goals off short corners. The opponent was too strong for us today when 11 v 11, and with 10 men, it was almost impossible." Leandro Trossard made a statement versus Ipswich. In one of his changes from Arsenal's win in Spain, Arteta decided to start Trossard as his number 9, moving Mikel Marino back into midfield. Thomas Partey will be suspended against Paris Saint-Germain, and it seemed as if Arteta was experimenting with that game in mind to some degree. And after scoring 2 goals against Ipswich, Trossard has surely done his chances of starting against PSG no harm. Interestingly, when speaking to BBC Match of the Day at full time, Arteta did praise the Belgian's versatility, perhaps hinting at a start against PSG. Praising Trossard, Arteta said, "He looked very sharp. We know his quality. Put him right, left or center, and he will deliver." With respect, Ipswich 0-4 Arsenal. Bukayo Saka escapes bad injury after horror tackle and big away win. Bukayo Saka was fortunate to escape a bad injury after a horror tackle from Ipswich defender Leif Davis in Arsenal's win at Portman Road. Davis was shown a straight red card in the first half when he raked his studs down the back of Saka's right ankle with a nasty late challenge. Saka received lengthy treatment, but was able to continue before being taken off 10 minutes into the second half. He had a huge ice pack strapped to his right ankle as he was sat on the bench in the second half, but the fact he avoided serious injury was a major relief for Arsenal ahead of their Champions League semi-final with Paris Saint-Germain. Leandro Trossard scored twice as Arsenal cruised to victory against Ipswich to delay the Liverpool title party. Arsenal went ahead after 14 minutes when Trossard finished well from inside the area. Mikel Marino should have doubled the lead with a header from a corner, but Arsenal did get a second goal on 28 minutes when Gabriel Martinelli tucked home at the back post. Ipswich were reduced to 10 men on 32 minutes when Davis was shown a straight red card for his late challenge on Saka. Saka was fortunate to avoid a bad injury, but the Arsenal man was able to continue after lengthy treatment and missed 3 big chances before halftime.